Hello to all of my caregivers. Welcome back to OMG, I'm a Caregiver. It's Tezzy Gilbert Baldwin, and I'm having another card conversation because it's just been that kind of a week. Not able to get back into my office, but I'm so happy to be here. And today we have my very good friend, Dominique Allen. Whoop, whoop. Dominique is going to talk to us today about all things hospice. And I'm whispering hospice because that word seems to really unnerve a lot of people. But I wanted him to come on and really talk about it because there's nothing to fear when you're armed with the appropriate information about hospice and all things hospice. So welcome, Dominique. Just jump right in and tell us about you, where you work, what you do, and then boom.
Awesome. I really appreciate you, Tezzy, for this invitation. I feel like a rock star immediately coming on this platform with you. My name is Dominique Allen. I work currently at Three Oaks Hospice here in the Med Center in Houston, Texas. And my main goal is providing what I believe is a necessary service and opportunity and being an educator in that regard on something as giving as hospice. A lot of people,
Okay.
when they hear that, or like you whisper hospice, antennas go up and people get goosebumps and fear sets in right away, right? And so
Right.
my goal and task and hope is that I can kind of let the guard down so you can
Mhm.
receive what you deserve, right? We work all our lives for a certain point, and then it seems like when we get to a certain stage of life, we become more afraid of living. And so,
I like that. That we become more okay. Why do you
uh,
think people are so afraid of hospice?
because of the stigmas associated with it,
Mm-hmm.
hospice has a morbid undertone by
Mm-hmm.
nature, and based on people's experience, which I understand. Some people have seen or know loved ones or individuals go through hospice, and all they know is that hospice results in end of life, right?
Mm-hmm.
But nobody ever really sees the work, the service, and the quality of life that hospice allows for those people dealing with those challenging conditions, right? So
Mm-hmm.
naturally, individuals are like, I don't know, that's not me, or I still want to fight or not believe. Sometimes we're in denial about our conditions or whatnot. And so I think sometimes people think they're succumbing to a certain fate by dealing with hospice. Yeah.
Okay. I can understand that. But I've learned, okay, so I'm not going to lie. When I started back into the skilled nursing world,
Mhm.
I really did not come. And when I met you, that's what I told you. I didn't come back with the full understanding of what hospice really is. When I came to where I'm currently working, there were lots of residents on hospice that were nowhere near death. And
Right.
I'm like, how's that possible? Aren't you supposed to go on hospice when you're, like you said, in stages of life? And
Right.
I'm seeing people walk around. We had a resident, or have a resident, she gets her makeup and her hair done. And
Mhm.
she bathes her and she comes and does a tuck in process for her every day. I'm like, hospice does that? Since
Right.
when? Tell me
Right.
more. Tell me about
Exactly.
that.
Exactly. So, hospice, to qualify, first of all, for hospice, you have to have what I like to call a life limiting illness, right? And so in medical terms, they say a terminal disease. So
Okay.
you have a medical condition which can result in the end of your life, and you're not seeking to do anything aggressively about it. So I
So
don't want
I'm sorry. So before you move on to the next breath of what you're about to say, give
to,
us some examples of what a terminal, how did you phrase it?
a life limiting disease.
Life limiting disease. What
Yes.
would some of those be?
So Alzheimer's and dementia, uh,
Mm-hmm.
stage four renal failure,
Mm-hmm.
stage four cancers or cancers that are metastasized,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes traumatic events that have caused brain damage. Those are the more traumatizing issues. But those type of diseases, anything that um, is in a phase that is deemed uncontrollable or incurable or untreatable.
Diabetes,
Yes, you can be in stages of diabetes and have complications with that and actually qualify for hospice care.
hypertension,
Absolutely. Hypertension
Okay.
is a little bit harder to manage though, or to kind of read, because stress is known as the silent killer.
Sure.
So a lot of times, people think it's harder to diagnose hypertension, but it's very possible.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
So the reason that I'm saying that is because some people these aren't the they don't have cancer. They may not have Alzheimer's, but
Hmm.
I have seen some information about things like diabetes,
Hmm.
uncontrollable diabetes, or
Hmm.
like you said, maybe where I guess that would be uncontrollable diabetes, right?
Absolutely. And then you have like CAD, coronary artery disease,
Yeah.
congestive heart failure, CHF.
Mhm.
You can have pulmonary issues,
Mhm.
with your breathing in your lungs.
Sure.
You can have COPD,
Mhm.
any medical condition that is beyond the scope of being able to controllably care for it.
Okay. All right. So that makes sense. Okay. So perfect. So now we got that covered. So
Hmm.
now I'm understanding, and I'm gonna just kind of regurgitate a little bit of what I think I heard you say is, you don't have to be dying to be on hospice.
No.
Um, you can have uncontrollable diabetes and be on hospice. If I have, um, maybe, and I'm a patient with uncontrollable diabetes, why would I need to get on hospice? Why would that be important for?
Apologize about that. So
Okay.
the way that I characterize hospice, I call it comfort care, right? So the majority of what we do in hospice care is provide comfort mentally, physically, and emotionally, right? And
Mhm.
so that's the
Sounds good.
major responsibility of hospice care. So that
Okay.
being said, um, a lot of times people progressively grow ill faster without appropriate care. And sometimes just
Okay.
getting a level of care or touch or attention that's needed, sometimes prolong life. We don't talk about that often,
Yeah.
but there are individuals that come on service that progressively get better, right? And then they no longer qualify for service at that point because their body has responded to the care that they've received. And so that's what I always try to explain to people is that everything is not morbid, but it's more about comfort,
Yeah.
right? You don't have to suffer.
Comfort.
You don't have to suffer because you have a life limiting illness. You don't have to suffer
Okay.
because, you're declining. You can decline
Okay.
gracefully, right? Or you
Okay.
can, you can, you can live out the remainder of your life in a graceful way. And,
Yeah. No, go
and so
ahead.
I always share with people, um, there are a few times we rush to the hospital, mainly when there's new life to come, right? When the doctor says the water has broke, hey, family, get here, get around. This new loved one is about to enter this earth. See the smile that came on your face? That's the feeling that happens right away when you hear of this, right? And so it's like you
Yeah.
get forewarned about a life that is to come, right? And so
Yeah.
everybody gathers. Why is it that
Sure.
if God allows, if I could say that, for us to have
Sure.
a forewarning that our life may be in the end stages? Why are we not,
Sure.
why do we have a different approach regarding that? Because the truth of the matter is a lot of individuals don't get that chance to know that, hey, I'm in my glory days, right? And so a lot of people don't get the opportunity to receive the love they deserve from their life's work
Mhm.
because they haven't accepted this, right? Or they're not aware of what's afforded to them. And so I believe that if we came in with a bang, I'm going out with a bang, right? And so
That makes
it's like,
sense.
hey, let's have a celebration because my faith tells me that
Sure.
this is not the end, but merely a passing point, right? I don't want to get too preachy,
For
but my,
sure.
my point is that it makes you feel better. It takes the burden off
Hmm.
of the family, and you can enjoy
Hmm.
each other. You can enjoy that time. One of the most beautiful things that I like
Hmm.
about dealing with individuals with Alzheimer's and dementia is that they may forget everything, right? But
Hmm.
for some reason, they always remember music. Music is
Hmm.
something that is foundational, that is in the fiber of the being, right? And so that recognizance of a beat, even if they don't remember the words, reminds them of a place of joy typically, right? And so even for
Hmm.
those that suffer in the area of memory, they're still able to find comfort. So what about
Sure.
those that can remember? How much more better do you think they will feel being able to be loved on by their loved ones? Because the truth of the matter is typically when individuals are dealing with life living in illnesses, the family is burdened with grief for trying to care for them and also sitting
Hmm.
in the reality of the situation. And you don't really enjoy those last moments with that individual, right?
True.
All you can remember is
True.
being tired.
True.
I've been to so many funerals or to so many instances where I've gone to serve a family and they're just so tired, right? And I've seen instances where um, families have have been rewarded for their experience in putting their loved one on hospice.
Makes
Yeah, yes,
sense.
ma'am.
Um, so what if I'm a caregiver,
Hmm.
my dad needs hospice? Am I able to get hospice and still remain a caregiver?
What if you say that one more time?
What if I'm a
Hmm.
caregiver and my dad needs hospice? I know sometimes, like, because I'm going to the comfort care part,
Hmm.
which means someone would come
Hmm.
in. If I'm my dad's caregiver, am I still able to qualify for that service, hospice service?
Absolutely, because the service goes to the patient, right? So you can provide as much care as you would like, but you can also get additional care and support by the services provided by the hospice company, right? So it kind of, in a way, can relieve you of having to be a caregiver, and you could just be daughter in that moment, and then you can choose
Mm-hmm.
what, when, where, and how you would like to care for father, right? If you still want to do
Mm-hmm.
certain things because that's what you do naturally, and you feel that that's the service you want to provide, by all means, continue to do so. But you don't have to do it from a burdensome place, meaning that you're doing it because you have to. No, it becomes now a service that
Right.
you can enjoy because it's what you do versus what you have to do. So,
Mm. Makes
Comfort Care
sense.
provides additional support. That's what I always say. It's not the end all be all, the only support. It's additional support, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
so
So tell me, when I met you, you you have a very interesting story. First of all,
thank you.
you have another. How can I say this? Another career. Can I call it a calling?
Absolutely.
I'll call it a calling outside of what you do, which we all have a calling to do
Hmm.
something. And then outside of that, you are still being thoroughly educated. You're working on your PhD,
Yes, ma'am.
right?
A doctor. Yes, ma'am.
That's amazing. Can you tell us a little bit about like what you do in the name of your calling, and then how does that relate to hospice? Are you able to bring your calling into what you do professionally?
Absolutely, surely. Thank you for bringing that up. So, I am a licensed and ordained preacher pastor. That is my calling. That is the anointing on my life. Something that,
Mm-hmm.
and I say it's my anointing or calling because it's something I've tried to shake and it just won't move, right? And so I've also been progressive in thought, progressive in my
Mm-hmm.
desires on how I want to teach and preach and lead God's people and teach the word of God. And so then there's
Mm-hmm.
hospice, right? So how I married it to um, hospice has become a part of my ministry because when we look at it, for all intents and purposes, it's a level of congregational care. It's just beyond the typical walls of the church, right? And so I'm doing what I
Mm-hmm.
would do as pastor. Pastors typically visit the sick at home, at the facility, in the hospital, right? That's part of the duty and responsibility of an effective and efficient pastor. So to do this day in and day out, it kind of serves my soul. My professor for my master's, Dr. Allison Geis Johnson, I'll never forget, she said, you must work the work that your soul must have. And she says, when you
Mm-hmm.
realize that and do that, you'll never work another day in your life because you're feeling your calling,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so
That's you.
hospice has become in a way a ministry for me because in my own personal experience, my great grandmother was a funeral home director, and I'm a fourth generation preacher. So if I wasn't at church, I was at a funeral or I was at a hospital, right? So I've
Okay.
been exposed to this
Mm-hmm.
all of my life, and being raised with my great grandparents and grandparents, I experienced loss early on, and so
Mm-hmm.
having been exposed to that, God revealed to me that you're a survivor, but you didn't survive just to tell your story. You survived to help other people deal with what you've experienced, right? So recently I lost my
Makes.
father 2 years ago, coming up November
Sorry to
13th.
hear
No,
that.
no problem. Thank you so much, for the condolences. But he died suddenly of a heart attack. So I
Hmm.
didn't get the opportunity to provide comfort or do what I thought I would do for my father in his last days. And so that's been the
Mm-hmm.
centripetal driving force for why hospice is a passion for me. Because if I can help somebody have a different experience that they can appreciate
Sure.
with less regrets and remorse, that's what I aim to do. So then there's the continuum of
Sure.
education. So I played football for 22 years, all the way from Mighty Mike's Pee Wee up to the professional level, right? And so I always remember, as long as I was an athlete, I always gave it my all. That meant not just on the field, but in practice and preparation and training and so on and so forth, right?
Makes
That was my
sense.
first love, right? Knowing I was called to preach, I tried to smother it with my passion for athletics and football. Okay. Well,
Okay.
God, one day I was running as fast as I thought I could. He tripped me up and said, son, until you do what I call you to do, you're going to suffer in ways that you can't imagine. I start preaching, and the first thing that hits me is, well, son, if you're going to do this, you need to give it your all. So that's how I landed
Yeah.
getting my master's in divinity, and now I'm getting my doctorate in ministry at United Theological Seminary in Dayton, Ohio. I just finished my doctoral project since the last time we spoke. I'm actually writing the
Okay.
finishing pieces to my dissertation with the results of that. And then I'll be
Yay.
defending in
Yay.
February, so I'll be Dr. Allen in 2025. Um,
Okay,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
2025.
I never would have thought or imagined or dreamed, uh, that to be the case, but it is. And so in my project, we had to write a spiritual autobiography, kind of telling the story of our life up until this point, and then we had to do a ministerial context in the area where we serve. There was a congruency between my life and the community and the church in which I serve. And then there was an instance where my father transitioned in my first semester into my doctorate. So therefore, out of that work came my work, which is known as effectuating grief, trauma, and
Okay.
lost in the African American church context and community.
Okay.
In layman's terms, I'm examining the effects of sudden loss, trauma, and grief on the African and in African Americans in specific, but in the community as a whole.
Mm.
Right? Come back to me when you have questions. I'm here for it.
Okay. So tell me so far, what have you, why, okay, before I even ask that, what made you pick that topic?
So the topic picked me. That's what I'm explaining.
Okay.
So the way the research process works, most doctors, you go in and you have a subject or topic you want to explore and expound upon. The way this program is set up is you write out your life. And if you do it effectively, then if you do it honestly, you're going to have to, first of all, deal with the traumas that you already experienced in your past before, because you got to do some digging. So
Sure.
by design, you got to drudge up everything that you may have tried to bury.
Sure.
Right. And then in my context, I have to do research on the context
Mm-hmm.
and find the congruency in my life and the context.
Okay.
So as I was doing that, then a life event happened, which my father's
Your dad died.
transition.
Mm-hmm.
All of this kind of happened at the same time. And so I wanted to come in and talk about, effectuating spiritual growth in the community,
Sure.
upward mobility, and just like, something like that.
Sure.
And
Sure.
God said, no. He
Yes.
said, son, I have taken you through all of this so that you can be a leader in this area and help others.
Okay.
Right. And so this has been one of the most grappling, challenging things I've had to approach in my life, but it's also been the most rewarding
Mm-hmm.
because my healing is happening
While
during
you're
this
doing this research.
process. And so I'm the first test subject. Yes.
You're the first test subject. Okay.
And I didn't realize that at first because I'm always planning to do the test subject. And then when I did the project, I realized I've been the subject as well.
Okay. I mean, I love your topic. I mean, I told you
Mm-hmm.
that when I met you. I just think it's, I would have never thought to do anything like that. But then in hindsight, being African American and thinking
Mm-hmm.
about all of the grief that I've experienced in my own personal life, and even
Mm-hmm.
just watching how various types of people deal with it, how men deal with it at different ages and different stages of
Mm-hmm.
life, how women deal with it at different ages and
Mm-hmm.
different stages of life. Um, how much of it, in terms of grief, do we ever really deal with the grief process, like effectively? Or,
Oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No.
I'm gonna bring my nerd side out now, right? So the process is broken down into multiple different ways. I had to do a biblical context.
Okay.
So my passage is John 12, the most famous scripture is Jesus wept, right? And so everybody knows that was my first grace. I would get up, get my food, and say Jesus wept, and I was like, basically Jesus cried over this food. Doesn't make any sense, right? But we did that, and then we had to do a historical context.
Sure.
And I had to do a theological context to see where God is on grief. How does he feel? What is his biblical stance?
Okay.
Where is God in grief? Does he
Okay.
grieve? I dealt with all of that, right? And then the historical context, I ended up landing on Negro spirituals, right? Which was birthed out of grief,
Okay.
right? So I wanted to do Thomas Dorsey, Precious Lord, Take My Hand. But the results said that the person had to be deceased for 100 years. So Thomas Dorsey is the father of gospel music, but he had not been deceased for 100 years. And so I got creative and I went back to the origin that brought his music out, which was Negro spirituals.
Gotcha.
In my research, I learned that it was not only just a form of communication. They sung these songs to communicate, but they also sung these songs to emote and express themselves.
I got you.
Because during chattel slavery, the only thing they had a right to do was to bury their dead. Right. And so grief was a priority and paramount during that time. Right. So for those that made it over to Jamestown and everywhere else, they came over with a level of grief. And so to back this, I had to do an interdisciplinary study. And I chose Sigmund Freud's 1906 essay entitled Mourning versus Melancholia.
Okay.
In other words, Freud says it's necessary to have good grief, right? We all ought to mourn, when we lose or we have loss of a loved one or circumstance or situation. There is a grief that's associated with that is natural and necessary, right? Because it shows there's a separation and it shows your humanistic, emotional side, right? He said the danger becomes when we slip into what's called melancholia. But we stay in a state of melancholy too long while grief turns inward and we begin to blame because we refuse to move on in life in a new reality. So in that research, this is what really got me on the hook to where I started digging more. It says 85% of African Americans suffer from melancholia. In other words, 85% of African Americans deal with inward grief. They experience something that they never really moved on from or really processed, and they begin to internalize it, blame themselves, even without knowing, and then live in a state of inward grief. In other words, they live in a state of oppression and depression. Here it is. We're born. My grandmother used to always say, son, you're going to have to work twice as hard to get what you want naturally, right? So in the origin, in our history, we born in a state of accepting a certain level of oppression naturally, right? And nobody's ever helped us to unwind that or really deal with that. And so we just say it is what it is, famous phrase, and we take a licking and keep on ticking, right? So there's always one blow though that messes us up. See, those are the lickings we anticipate because we're ready for that. But the blows we don't anticipate, coupled with what we're already dealing with, is what really sets us awry. And so that's when grief begins to really get us because everybody deals with a level of grief. Sure. Right? Everybody's had sudden loss. There's been loss of resources. You lost your dog growing up. You might remember that. Like everybody's dealt with that. And everybody's had certain traumas. Sure. But it's like you said, in the stage and phase of life that it happens that dictates how you respond and what you do. Sure. And you said a statement earlier, and I'll be quiet. African Americans process things differently. Sure. One of our processes is to not deal with it. That's a problem. One of our processes is, we're so tough, right? We can be toughened, but that doesn't make us tough, right? And to be so toughened that you're hardened, so it's not always healthy. Yeah. And so the work of my project is to help us work through these things so that we can be the best total person that we were designed to be. Yeah. Because we have normalized what is unnormal, right? We have come to accept and expect and learn how to operate with certain weight that we shouldn't. And so so like any car on a frame, if there's too much sludge in the engine, it's still running right now, but eventually that engine is going to die. Yeah, that's going to stop. And everybody doesn't get a new engine. Yeah. Everybody doesn't get a new lease. So if you can just reduce that. Yeah. So what's your suggestions to caregivers, right? They are taking care of a loved one. They may be experiencing grief and this is
regardless what race they are.
Mm-hmm.
What are your suggestions? Like, how would you suggest, from your point of view, you are a pastor,
Mm-hmm.
you're educated, you're doing your research, on X, Y, and Z. Just kind of give some suggestions on ways to manage grief.
Perfect. So, and I can give examples by just sharing with you what I've done that's been successful for myself personally. I've had to realize that what I do the most is not all that I do, right? There is another side to me. There's more to life than just what I do.
Sure.
So I put my all into being a pastor. I put my all into providing hospice care. But there's another side of Dominique that has nothing to do with any of that.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times we shift all our focus to what our greatest passion is and we neglect ourselves.
Sure.
Right. And so I literally plan time to have fun, put it on my calendar and honor my schedule. So if I'm going somewhere and this is to serve me, sometimes it's okay, watch this, to be selfish. We always hear selfish in a negative connotation. But sometimes I'm doing some selfish things. These are things that I like to do that serve me.
Mm-hmm.
We got one life to live, right? And I don't ever want to look back and have regrets about what I didn't do. Mm-hmm. Because that means the thing that I did do, I will grow to resent.
Sure.
So then I'm not going to do anything effectively because what I do every day, all day won't be effective because I resent it. And then I neglected myself from the things that I like to do.
Sure.
Right. So number one, I would plan and schedule time for fun.
Schedule time for fun.
Take breathers.
Take breathers.
Go to sleep. I know I'm talking to somebody because a lot of times we move, me in particular, all day long like an Energizer Bunny. Mm-hmm. And I go to sleep because I have to.
Sure.
Right. So I end up crashing and I wake up and I run. I'm learning now in this phase of life that I'm in to actually try to get some rest and go to bed.
Sure. Yeah.
Regardless, whatever I did not accomplish in that day was not meant to be accomplished that day.
Yeah.
I don't care about what standard what anybody says. I can try to attain it all day long. I have what's called a capacity. Mm-hmm. That's another point that I would lift. Know your capacity.
Know your capacity.
I'm learning to understand myself is to know my limitations.
Yes.
We don't like to admit that we have those. Mm-hmm. We like to be superwoman and superman and be all things to all people. I know that's me, right? But understanding my capacity and my limitations mm-hmm. and honoring that, mm-hmm. right? Whatever I don't get done today, there is always tomorrow mm-hmm. by God's grace, right? Sure. And so keeping that in perspective, not taking everything so serious. Mm-hmm. There's a time and place to do what you do, mm-hmm. and it's a serious matter. Mm-hmm. But be loving, laugh, enjoy the moment. Yes. The first thing I do every day now is I get up and I take in the day. Yes. What do you mean? I get up and I realize that I will never see Thursday, October 24th, 2025 ever again. Sure. And if I wake up and do everything that day and don't do anything memorable for that day mm-hmm. that serves me, I've wasted the day. So when I get up now, I have a devotional life. It's not always reading scripture, mm-hmm. but I'm devoted to what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. If I get up and stand on my balcony and just take 10 deep breaths, right, and then look outside for 5 minutes and just watch whatever's going on, that period is a period of me being present. It sets me off in a calm way, and it prepares me to attack the day ahead, right? And then when I conclude my day, I try to do the same thing. Reflect and recap on the things that made me feel good about my day mm-hmm. because it serves as encouragement for the next day, right? In the workplace, what do you do? If there's moments of stress, tension, if there's moments of discomfort, because this is challenging work that we do being a caregiver, right? And I've always prayed and asked that I would never become so robotic that I can never emote, right? Because I believe that compassion plays a big part in what we do. Yeah. If I get to a state where I can't be compassionate, take a break. Go to the break room, go to your car, have a drink of water, go for a 5-minute walk, get yourself back in your equilibrium, and then come back and be the person that you were designed to be. I hope that advice helps, but that is what
It's
I
great.
typically
That's
do.
great advice.
And, and don't take everything personal.
That's big.
A lot of times, and I'm just putting all my laundry out. A lot of a lot of times we internalize. That's that melancholy.
Mm-hmm.
We internalize things that are not necessarily so. Anxiety, depression, fatigue.
Okay.
All these are contributing factors to negative internalization. If I'm worried about something, if I'm tired, or if I can't get a break, I'm going to naturally think in a not positive way,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to affect how I work. So be optimistic
Okay.
and don't take everything personal.
Don't take everything personal. I like it. I like it. I mean, it's sound. I'm sorry, I get this message just come up. It's sound
No.
information. It makes sense, and I think they serve as important and positive reminders, because
Hmm.
what I'm learning and from other caregivers is their days stay consumed with the person.
Hmm.
And at the end of the day, when they look up, they don't remember that they have to involve self-care for themselves, and
Hmm.
that they're also important, and that their lives also matter, because being the caregiver means that if you're not in top-notch shape, then you can't provide adequate care to the person that you're overseeing, right? So your
Right.
mental is just as important as your physical. It may be more important, because sometimes what happens here triggers what happens in here. So I think that's very sound advice. And I think the more people hear that sometimes it's okay, and you said it, to be selfish. This is not an everyday act. No one's saying that this is something that you should do every day, but sometimes it is okay to take time to yourself and
Hmm.
to let someone else do the heavy lifting, which is where sometimes hospice can come into play with the comfort
Hmm.
care, right?
Exactly.
Just knowing what resources are available to you, and what you have access to. Why?
Oh, I can't hear you. Oh, there we go.
Um, it's me. Okay. Sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Um, any other closing remarks about your dissertation? Any advice? Any words of wisdom, knowledge that you want to drop to the people?
Drop a few nuggets. What was I about to tell you? Most importantly, what I want you to get from this, everyone, oh, here's what I want to tell you. Mentor told me a while ago, you cannot effectively serve if you're empty. A lot of times we're pouring people from the bottom of the cup, and we claim that it's the riches because all the contents fall to the bottom. But a lot of times, like if you're a coffee drinker, you're getting the tar. It doesn't taste as good, right? And so I encourage you to always, yes, pour out, but make sure you refill, right? You can't adequately serve someone if you're in need of service. And nobody
Yeah.
is responsible for your service better than you are, right? So
Mm.
if you're not getting refilled, you're never going to be effectively filling someone else's needs. And so my closing remarks would be find out what you need, find out your areas of weakness along with your areas of strength, and find out where the gaps are. And it takes courage to do this, but work on filling the gaps in your own life. And if
Oh.
you do that, then what you were called to be and called to do will ooze out of you easily.
Mm.
A lot of times we struggle to provide consistency. That's the word I want to leave with you. We struggle to provide consistency because we're not consistent in our feeling. So whatever that might be for you, develop a regimen that serves you so that you can serve others. The best servants
I like it.
serve on full, not on empty.
I love it. I love it. And that's so true. I'm thinking about how I feel after I've crashed,
Mm-hmm.
and when I've taken time and I've had a even a
Mm-hmm. No problem.
I'm sorry, or even a a vacation.
Mm-hmm.
Just having an opportunity to take the breather and come back, it helps. It always does. You come back, you're refreshed, and you're ready for whatever new challenge, you have to take on from there. It doesn't feel
Mm-hmm.
so weighty. So I agree. I love it. I thank you so much.
Mo-
Go ahead.
Absolutely. I'll share this right quick. Most devices come with a reset button,
Yeah. Most
right?
devices good.
It's there for a purpose.
That's good.
It's there for a purpose. A lot of people are afraid to reset because they think they're going to lose everything that they gain. But there's a memory thing in there that stores your progress,
Sure.
right? So don't be afraid to hit the reset button.
I love it.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much for being on my show. And I appreciate every piece of knowledge that you've dropped. I
Mhm.
appreciate you even taking the time to give some nuggets and some words of wisdom from your pastoral background. You know, having
Absolutely.
Jesus and as much faith and love and peace and hope that can be spread, we should be doing that, because there's so much going on in the world, and you just can't have enough. And I feel like I'm seeing more and more people that need that fill up. They need that fill up. So I appreciate you even just giving those words of wisdom.
Absolutely.
So thank you for being on. I appreciate you. And thank you to my caregivers and everybody for tuning in. And we will see you later.
Thank you.